Okay, so we're back for part 2. So, the defense team goes back with Rusty to his house with Barbara. And Raymond says, let's say we can convince the jury that, or let's say the jury is convinced that Carolyn was murdered after, like shortly after 10. Because that's what the prosecution is saying. Can we prove that you were home at that time? Barbara says she can vouch for him. Maya shuts it down immediately. And she's like, can't put you on the stand. Which I 1000% agree with. And Barbara's like, why? And Maya's like, because when you're cross-examined, it's just going to make Rusty look worse. So she gives some examples of things that she'll be asked, such as, Mrs. Savage, were you aware that Rusty restarted his affair with Carolyn? That he got her pregnant? We all have secrets. Does he know about Clifton, the friendly neighborhood bartender? And Barbara's like, excuse me? Were you having me followed? And Maya's like, sometimes we hire private investigators to find out the truth in the event it'll help. Sometimes it does. First of all, Gabby, if you're watching this, you ate down in that scene. You ate down the entire series, just so you know. You did a phenomenal job coming from a real life lawyer. You did a phenomenal job playing an attorney. Phenomenal. This scene where you did this faux cross-examination, ate it, nailed it. Because that's exactly what would have happened. And that scene, y'all, in case you're wondering, that's what they talk about in law school when they tell you don't cross-examine your friends and family. What Maya did in this scene. That's what they're referring to. Hope you watch this, Gabby. And as a matter of fact, I loved you so much in this. This is the first thing I've seen you in. I will be going to your IMDb to watch everything that you've been in because I loved you in this so much. You are an excellent actress. Excellent. So, all right. So Rusty decides, okay, let's rest as a defense. That means they're going to stop presenting evidence. Rusty wants to do the closing argument. Again, yet another horrific idea from Rusty. Raymond rightfully says, you have no credibility with this jury. And for me, a lot of lawyers are control freaks. And also, lawyers love to have the last word. And I feel like this is what Rusty was doing here. He genuinely believes that nobody can make a better case for him than himself. And I think it's a terrible idea. But I think that Rusty, to me, I feel like him wanting to do the closing also shows that he thinks he's a better lawyer than Raymond. And I don't think that he is. But nevertheless. So Jaden comes into the garage where Rusty is practicing his closing and tries to talk him out of doing it. And he says, I'm my best chance, Jay. And like I said, I think he genuinely believes that because he thinks he's a better lawyer than Raymond. So when you hear Raymond's advice to Rusty right before they go into court, the first thing you hear is him say, just the elements. So what he's referring to are the elements of the crime that Rusty's been charged with. So the burden of proof in a criminal case is on the prosecution. And the burden is beyond a reasonable doubt. So what that means is the state has to prove every element of the crime that you are charged with beyond a reasonable doubt for a conviction to be warranted. So when Ray is saying just the elements, he's referring to the elements of the crime. But the juries can do whatever they want. There's something called jury nullification, which basically means that even if the jury thinks the defendant is guilty, they can return a not guilty verdict because they think that's what would actually be just. They can also return a guilty verdict, even if they feel like all elements haven't been proven beyond a reasonable doubt, just because they just think in their gut that the person is guilty. So juries are comprised of human beings, and human beings can be unpredictable. So Rusty, gets up, he starts doing his closing, and he plays on emotion because he's talking about the anguish that he called his wife. He's lost the respect of his children. And I thought that was very smart because, as I just said, jurors are humans with emotion. So any way that you can play with emotion, make them feel something, you should do it. He talks about how he loved Carolyn and he wants to find her killer just as bad as anyone else. In my head, I was thinking, well, the fact that you loved her, that doesn't mean anything. You can kill someone that you love. Many people have done it. So that I kind of was like, in one ear, out the other. I would have to give Rusty's closing an 8 out of 10. This is the most Jake has felt like a lawyer to me the entire series. Typically what I have seen defense attorneys do in real life is they will get a chart and they will go through all these different, kind of things like, if you kind of think that he did it, that's reasonable doubt. You must acquit. If you probably think he did it, that's reasonable doubt. You must acquit. And they'll just kind of go through like that. And they'll say, even if you think any one or all of those things, that is not beyond a reasonable doubt, and you have to acquit the defendant. So I kind of feel like he should have done that to drive home the point that he's not an honorable man, because we've seen that he's not one. So had he done that, I might have given him 10 out of 10. So in case you were wondering, the prosecution gets to give their closing argument second because they have the burden of proof. So in Georgia, the prosecution can close first, then the defense, and the prosecution would have a chance to rebut the defense argument because they have the burden of proof. Usually what the prosecution does is they waive their right to speak first, and then they just speak the second time. I don't know what the rules are in Chicago, but in Georgia, that's the rule. I would give Tommy's closing an 8 out of 10 as well. Normally, what I've seen prosecutors do is they will typically ask. They will give, their list of reasons. They will say what they proved because, again, they have to drive home they've proved every element of the crime. So they will say that we proved this, we proved that. Or a lot of times they'll reference their opening statement, and they will, because usually in the opening statement, the state will say, we intend to show. And so they'll reference that and they will say, I told you the first day of trial that I was going to prove this, I was going to prove that, I was going to prove this. And in their closing argument, they will say, and I proved A, B, and C. And then after they go through everything they proved, they'll say, because I proved all these things, I ask you to find the defendant guilty. So Tommy did not close with that, which I feel like he should have. So that's why I'm only giving him 8 of 10. One of the things that you hear Rusty say in this episode is the longer a jury deliberates, the more it favors the defense. In my personal experience, I have waited for several juries to come back, and I have found that to be true. Waiting for juries is horrific. Like, it's so nerve-wracking. Your stomach is in knots the whole time, and you're not even the one on trial. And what's insane about this episode is they did such a good job of creating that nerve-wracking, tense atmosphere, because I was sitting here watching the show, literally like so incredibly anxious, and this is just a television show I'm watching. I felt like the same way that I have felt in real life when I was waiting for a real jury. That's how I felt watching this. But this video is about to end, so yes, we're headed to part 3, and that's going to be my last part because I'm at the end of my notes. So see you for part 3.